Hello, my name is Poskin. For as long as I can remember, sport has been a big part of my life. From being taken to arenas to help with my dad's power skating program, to playing random games with my siblings at home, to eventually playing soccer in university, and for one magical season semi-professionally. Sport can have so many benefits for young people. Kids don't need to make it to the big leagues to find success and tools for life. From my time as an athlete to coaching to working as an athletic trainer and strength and conditioning coach to being a mom of three young athletes, I've seen sport from all perspectives. There are so many takeaways from simply being involved in sport. My husband and I will often find ourselves talking about sport, which is where this project came from. It is only fitting that my first conversation is with my husband, Mike Poskin. Mike shares his story as an athlete, his struggles, his moments of learning, and his passion to make youth sport the best that it can be. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to sharing Mike's story and many more to come. Enjoy. This episode of the Youth Sport Podcast is brought to you by Lululemon. I am part of the Lululemon Collective and will receive commissions when you shop through my link. Buying something for you or your loved ones, like my favorite warm down joggers, helps me to continue to bring interesting and empowering conversations for everyone. I have to tell you, when I'm coaching, I want to make sure that I'm dressed appropriately, I'm comfortable, my clothes stand up to all kinds of random situations, and that I have pockets. You never know who's going to ask you to hold something for them or what random things you need to carry with you. The Lululemon warm down joggers take care of all of my needs. I invite you to find your go-to item by browsing through the entire Lululemon site. You won't be disappointed. Please use the link provided in the video description below to start shopping. Welcome to the Youth Sport Podcast. My name is Poskin, and I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly within youth sport. It feels great when a kid comes up to you and says, "Coach, because of you, my life changed in the best way." It would feel awful to hear that because of you, the coach, a kid doesn't want to have anything to do with it ever again. I believe that kids deserve to have fun, to learn, to grow, to compete, and to play in a great environment. Join me as I interview guests that spill the tea on youth sport in order to help you make an enormous impact with kids right now. Hello and welcome. I'm really excited. I am kicking off a podcast about youth sport, and we're really trying to make an impact with as many athletes as we can. And I'm super stoked to have my first guest on. Mike Poskin is a former NCAA soccer athlete. He is a U.S. nationally certified soccer coach, a youth baseball coach, and a dad to 3 youth athletes. And if you didn't pick up that he has the same last name as me, he is my husband. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
It's great. I'm glad you are. And I was going to have a silly joke being like, the call is coming from inside the house, because we're both in the same house, but we had to get onto different computers and far enough away that it wouldn't mess with each other. So here we are, being silly, being super close to each other, but virtually connecting. So it's awesome. Okay, so the first thing that I just wanted to let everybody know was that Mike and I actually met because of sport, and we fell in love because of sport. And there's 2 stories that I have about Mike that made me fall in love with him. And the first was when we were working at university soccer camp. We had all kinds of little kids coming in and out week after week after week. And Mike is a very patient guy when it comes to helping and being kind. And he's the kind of guy that people go to because he's just a really sweet person. And you could see that when he was working with the kids. And I remember one story specifically with, I don't know, this you'll remember too, but maybe this kid was at the most 3 years old. And he didn't want to have anything to do with what we were doing. And so Mike just took him aside and he just started playing games with him one-on-one. And the funniest thing that this kid thought was that there was air inside of a cone. So if you had a cone that was covered at the top, not the half cut ones, but Mike would hold it, and then all of a sudden he would pick it up and he'd be like, "Whoa, do you see what's inside of there?" And the kid would be like, "No, what's inside of there?" And he was like, "There's air in there." And the kid would go, "There's ale in there?" And this was the funniest thing for this kid. Do you remember this story?
Yeah, those were the kids that they would get dropped off at like 7 a.m. by their parents and not picked up until like 4. And the kid was, yeah, he was like 3 or 4 years old and like was not ready for a full day of soccer.
Yeah, but you
So he
made
had to
it
do other
awesome.
stuff.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, he had to do other things. Yeah.
yeah. And so you picked up on that at like our super young age, because we were just in our like late teens, early 20s at that point. And some people in that age bracket wouldn't want to have anything to do with little kids. And so, yeah, that was what made me really attracted to you, was because you just had this gift of just looking to see who needed help and taking time to help them. So that was one of the stories. And then my second story, I won't embarrass you, but it has to do with air guitar.
Oh no, I don't. I've never done that.
No, you've never. Yeah, we
No.
we don't need to talk about that. Mike does play the guitar and he's very good. And he also likes to imagine what it might be like on stage sometimes.
Not as much anymore, but yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
back in the day.
Okay. So I want to go back a little bit, and there may be things that I've never learned about you that we may uncover in this conversation. And so I'm super excited just to get your insight as a young athlete. So just tell us a little bit about your experience before you were 10 years old. What did that look like? What were you doing? Who was coaching you? And what did you like?
Well, I think I've always played soccer. I started probably when I think I was 3, and the first experience I ever had playing soccer it was an indoor soccer game. I can remember specifically going and playing, and the entire time I thought I was playing basketball because I had been watching my brother play basketball for the last, I don't know, probably like, I don't know, the whole season or part of the season, whatever it was, but he was playing basketball and that's all that I knew. So the goalie would pick the ball up and I'd stand in front of him with my hands up and then it was our goalie. So after a while, I think that was my first experience, and I was explained the rules, and we were kind of learning as we were going. So that was my first experience playing soccer. But yeah, most of those early years were playing a lot of soccer, baseball in somebody's backyard at home. We were playing hockey on the street. So whether that was on feet or rollerblades, we were doing that. Riding bikes, so not really anything organized. That's pretty much all I did go leading up until probably around that 10 or 11-year-old age. That the only organized thing I had was soccer, but a lot of that soccer was coached by my dad. And if it wasn't coached by my dad, it was probably coached by another dad who was just volunteering to play. The cool thing was, though, is my dad grew up not playing soccer. He played football, he played baseball and basketball. And I can remember specifically my dad, because he didn't know anything about it, he did a lot of research. So he was trying to find books on soccer. And so I probably did a lot of random drills that might have been too hard for us at that point. But I remember having a good experience with it. I remember my dad being very patient, very encouraging, and would always try to make everything fair for everybody. Those were kind of like I think that's like my main real memory from those really early stages. I can remember other kids not really being into it. Like one kid would pick up leaves and collect leaves during a game. So yeah, the early stages were really chaotic.
And then as you got older, do you remember where the shift started to happen, where maybe you had to become a little more serious, where you had to focus on changing more time into one sport, and what happened with the coaching after that?
Between 9 and 11, really, I kind of started getting a sense of like, okay, like I get what this is. I really like it. I really enjoy it. and I like being competitive. I liked running around. Maybe between those years, I started to, maybe I was getting a little bit better at just being an athlete at that point, and probably like being noticed by people because I was a bit faster than kids and probably picked up some things a little bit better. So those years are a bit in between of like, yeah, it's just fun, and then really starting to understand like people telling you, hey, you should go and like try out for this team or whatever. So yeah, that kind of led up to really like when I was 11 trying out for the rep or the club team. It's kind of funny, I didn't know who was who. Like I my dad said, there's these tryouts, we're gonna go and see how you do, and I had no idea who the club was or who was coaching, or I didn't know any of that stuff,
I
which is,
remember you telling me that everything was through mail. So you had to
yeah,
wait for like if you made the team or not, you had to wait for an actual piece of paper to come in the mail.
yeah. So that was, I mean, that was the first, I think it was like that for the first couple of years. Like there was no email. There was what are they called? Like waterfall lists or something. Like
Yeah.
they
You call
had
one person, next
everybody's
person.
phone
Yeah.
number. Yeah. So that was like, it could take 2 hours to get through the list of like, hey, practice is canceled
Yeah. So your
or
buddy
whatever.
Joe finds out that he's made the team and you're like, oh no. Oh no, I haven't heard
Yeah.
yet. 2 hours later, you finally get a phone call or you don't get a phone call. So that's gotta be
Yeah.
painful.
Well, those were just mail. So those weren't to find out if you made the team. It was just mail.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, I can remember getting the letter. So it's funny because I remember getting that letter that first year, and I did not. So they had enough kids to make two teams, and I did not make the first team. And so I made the second team. Anyway, that first year was kind of interesting. I ended up playing for a coach who was, he was, he was a pretty nice guy, super approachable, good coach, and really kind of pushed the envelope, I think, a little bit for a lot of us to say, like, you guys deserve to be on that team, which the first team, all of you guys deserve to be there. So we're going to work to get you there. And I'd say probably like at least half of the team, by the time 2 years passed, that half of the team was on that first team. So he kind of did a lot of work with kids and like really dedicated himself, which is kind of cool. But anyway, that's just a side note that when you come across some good coaches, there are those guys that you don't really say anything to because you're so young at that point. But I think as you're moving on, you kind of realize like that guy probably helped me get further along than had I made the first team and some guy who just said, yeah, you're okay, like sit on the bench.
Yeah, it's that. Yeah, having someone that's going to look at into your development as the big picture. So how can we see where you're at right now, and then have some benchmark goals and get you a little bit further along? I think that
Yeah.
all of us strive to be those kinds of coaches. So I know that you're a quiet kind of a guy. How did sport help you as a young person, in terms of like socializing and staying out of trouble? And well, because one of the biggest things that we're noticing now in the area that you grew up, there's a really big drug problem. And so do you think that sport helped you in order to become the person that you are today?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways. I think, well, I mean, one, like when you're involved in sports, it takes up a lot of time. Just that time, the energy, and the effort that you kind of put in to what you're doing keeps you away from a lot of stuff. When I was playing, our season started in around Easter time. So whether it was March or April, it would go until at least mid July, early July to mid. And every weekend I was going somewhere or traveling to a game or practice or a tournament. And a lot of times, like, I knew kids were doing stuff that I was buddies with, but they weren't playing on a team or they were in a different sport. And I just wasn't around. I think there was a lot of times school would get out. People wouldn't see me until school started again. So whether that was me being me and quiet, I don't know, but I had a lot of time dedicated to doing sports and traveling, and that kind of just the time alone keeps you away from certain things, whether that's good or bad, I don't know. In terms of like socializing, yeah, you might not be always socializing with kids you go to school with, but you might be socializing a lot with kids on your team. And I think that helps too. Like if you're just hanging around the same group of kids all the time, yeah, you might have the same group of kids in school and the same team for a long time. Total, I think that's fine because you build those relationships in those different groups. But you can almost find a way of like, well, you have to find a way of like, where do I fit in? Who am I in this group? Like, do I have to be this type? Can I be this type of person? Am I allowed to just kind of be reserved and quiet and I don't have to be the outgoing guy? And the other group, maybe you are because you have a lot of kids that are reserved. So I think you kind of work on who you are as you're growing up. If I decided when I was 15 that no, I don't want to play rep soccer anymore. I just want to play just in the travel side. I just want to play high school. That's it. It's totally fine. But I never would have had those coaches along the way and got me to where I am now to say, this is what you need to do to succeed. There are a lot of things I think I've picked up along the way from really good people and really good coaches and teammates that probably have helped me get where I am. And I think I could have gone the other way.
Yeah, and I think
So
that's the
I
best
think,
thing that you could have had ingrained as you move forward. They say it takes a village to raise children, and that can encompass your teachers and your coaches and your friends and everything. And so just having those life skills that you learned as you were going through, I mean, yeah, like we didn't become high paid professional athletes, but at the same time, we learned things that did help us as we got older for sure. So those things
mm-hmm.
are key. Now let's fast forward to your
Did I
university.
answer?
Yeah,
Did I
you
answer your
answered.
question?
Yeah, you
Okay.
did. Yeah. Oh, I did want to say one thing though, because I got a really, okay, so I am Canadian and well, Mike is now living in Canada as well. So he's got dual citizenship, but growing up in the American sport world is completely different from what I experienced. And so Mike was in newspapers and he was a popular guy in school because of sport. And he was on floats for parades, which we never
Oh,
had for sure.
stop.
I just picture this Letterman jacket on him as a younger person. And that's just kind of the culture that he grew up in. So now, that was kind of high school, right? Like you had a lot of this popularity and a lot of success in sport. You're probably modest about that, but you're a very good athlete. So now, going into university, you were scouted to go to Marshall, and tell us about that. Tell us about what happened your first year.
Okay, so how it always worked is, so you kind of have to go back into the summer. So that was kind of one of our last years playing rep or club soccer. So I had pulled my hamstring really bad and did no rehab. And going to a Division I school, it's intimidating. It's like the school's big, the buildings are big, the stadiums are there. It was difficult. I hadn't done conditioning. There were guys that were like, maybe like in their second or third year, and they were just animals. Like they had been in the weight room and they had been doing their preseason stuff before they even got there. And so they were just they were like men. And me showing up, I think I weighed like $125 and I'm 5'7" if I'm trying to be generous. It's like so me showing up there was really like I'm still a little kid. That was a turning point for me where I realized that okay, this dream that I've always had to like keep playing and be the best isn't feasible. I never would have admitted that. I don't think I've ever admitted that till now. But my first year at university was not good. That whole year was super difficult. From that point, from realizing like it's kind of over, man, like you got to go and do something else. And I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do because that was all I had.
Right.
And I can still play, just doesn't have to be at a certain level. Like I don't need to be like the person or play on the team. I can play on a team and have fun. By the end of, I'd say like February, I decided I'm not coming back. Like I still want soccer to be a part of it. and I want to figure out where I can go that I actually will fit in, and do I know somebody that's familiar? So that's what kind of took me to Cal. Was Lasky was there. I had
So we have to
played for
tell
him
people. So eventually, Mike transferred to the school where we met, which is California University of Pennsylvania. And Coach Lasky, it was both his coach and my coach for the first couple of years. And Coach Lasky is amazing. So just to give you some reference point as to what that is all about. And I'm actually very happy that things didn't work out at Marshall because otherwise I never would have met you. And so I feel like, yeah, obviously we all go through these different things, and then you look back and you think, okay, what did I learn from it? And at the time it's got to be super hard. I mean, that's a big part of your identity. And for a lot of athletes who were good athletes, they were told forever how good they were. And so if you're fed that information long enough, you start to believe it. And then that belief system is all that you know. And so that transfer from going from being this top dog in high school to having a reality check in university is quite the blow.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I transferred too. Before I left for school, or before I made a decision to go to Marshall, I remember getting a letter from him in the mail. Hey, like, I know you made a commitment to Marshall, and wishing you all the luck in the world. If anything ever changes, feel free to give me a call. At the time when I read it, it was like, oh, that's really nice of him to send. But for whatever reason, that stuck in the back of my head. And when I decided to leave Marshall, he was the only coach that I called, and he was the only school. Cal was the only school that I asked to be released to. So when I got to Cal, it must have been one of the first days. Lasky called me into his office and was like, "Oh, so what's the deal, man? Like, like you kind of struggled last year at school." And so we just talked about it. Like, I told him everything of how I felt, what happened. And he just said, like, okay, like, I get it. Like, totally understandable. It's tough to go through. He's like, my door's always open, but I need you to commit to being here and doing what you want to do, and like focus on it. So that really changed me again, almost back to like, okay, I'm back into soccer. Like, this is great. After that, it was kind of like, okay, maybe I can get into coaching. So I came back into the summer camps. We went and did our coaching courses.
Yeah.
And then I started coaching another club team. I was 22, coaching a bunch of 16-year-olds.
Yeah.
15 or 16-year-olds. So it was kind of like.
And you had a lot of fun doing that. You did that with a buddy, and I just remember joking a lot with the boys. And I think they really appreciated it too. I mean, having a young person stepping up, I think that's a big thing, right? Like, I'm sure a lot of these kids are used to having their parent coaching, because that happens all the time. There's only so many people that are going to step up and coach. And yeah, like, you and your buddy just decided that you were going to take on a team. And then I could imagine it was a really great year for those boys. And obviously you couldn't do it forever, because then life takes you on a different path. But for that time period, I'm sure those guys have a lot of memories of you guys coaching.
We were just kind of applying what we had learned along the way and what we knew. And some things were it was kind of like my dad coaching me when I was 6. Like, some of the stuff we were doing was probably way too hard for those guys. But I think you're right. I think they appreciated some of it, or I hope they did.
Yeah.
But it's just that whole, like, somebody's taking the time to actually put an effort towards what I really love. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what I always appreciated from a coach.
So now let's fast forward to you're a parent of 3 athletes, and our daughter's only 5. So we'll call her an athlete in the making. In training. She's trying to figure out what she wants to do. But I mean, our boys are too. That's all going to change. And we are getting a taste of the other side. So like, you've had the athlete side, you've had the coaching side. You are coaching our son baseball. So you're stepping up into your dad's shoes in terms of helping out. And we are also seeing what it's like to be the parent that's actually not involved. So having someone else take the reins of the sport, of the team. Tell me what you're seeing in terms of the good things. Like what's happening in youth sport that you really like at this point in time?
Well, it's funny because the other day it was like I had kids ask me with one of our kids groups was kids were asking me to untie their skates. Well, they're 8 years old. Like you can tie shoes, you can untie shoes. Can't really tie your skates, but for sure you can untie your skates. It's not like they don't have to be tight or anything. So like that kind of stuff. And a couple of the coaches reminding kids like, you don't need us. Like you
Right.
can do it. And it's the encouragement too, right? Like encourage kids to take some responsibility and to actually step up and not mature. Like that's not really making them mature, but it's making them like be like, okay, I can do this. I can get up and I can take my own skates off and I can get
Right.
undressed, put all my stuff in my bag. Like you can't have somebody there all the time. And so I feel like that kind of stuff is really helpful with the kids.
And now, on the flip side, the point of this podcast is to make sure that we're leaving some kind of advice or information that's going to be helpful. And so, without getting super negative, what would be the things that you would impress upon coaches from your own experience to help them become a better coach? So, might be like something when you were growing up where you got rubbed the wrong way and maybe the coach didn't even know that you were upset with them or that it made you not want to come to practice, and so their behavior would never change? What's something that you would want to tell a coach now after going through all kinds of your experiences in order to help them reach kids more and give them the best experience that they could have?
I'm just thinking like I did go through that. I had a coach um, who was relentless, but he was there for himself and nobody else mattered. I, for whatever reason, that season I became the kid who he was just focused on really like being brutal to. Like one small mistake totally would lay into me at practice. I can remember almost being in tears, and I was probably 15 around that 14 or 15, and just I didn't want to play. Like after that year I was convinced that I was done. So to go back to your question, like you don't I get where you want to try and get the most out of a player or a kid or any athlete. You want to get the most out of them. You want to teach them all these different things like we've been talking about, but you got to check yourself in terms of who am I here for? Am I here for the athlete or am I here for myself? If you're there for yourself, you probably shouldn't be there. You're not there for yourself. You're there for the kids. You're there to develop these kids, especially the younger kids. Like those kids, we've talked about that a lot, that those kids are super impressionable. Like you could ask a 10 or 11-year-old to like run through a wall, and if he believes that you are telling him the right thing to do, he's going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So like I think the last thing is that it's really important to have that relationship with all of the players on your team. Like you don't have to be dead serious all the time. If you're cracking jokes somewhere with them or around them and they're hearing some stuff where you're kind of being silly or just joking or whatever, like that's important too, because the players want to know that you're human, that you've got this personality, that you're not just a drill sergeant all the time. The human aspect of it, that we're all humans. We're not super athletes. And for every kid, it's different. Like some kids can be coached where you're just yelling at them and really telling them what to do all the time. And other kids, like you've really got to just sit down and talk to them, or they just need to be like, hey, good job, and encouraged. And that's it. Or like encouraged with a little bit of constructive criticism that really will help them.
And finally, my last question for you, if you can remember one time, so you have a very specific memory of feeling like crap and never wanting to play anymore because of something that a coach did. Do you have a memory of like the opposite where you felt amazing because of how you were being coached? What was it that triggered you to feel like you felt like you were in the right place?
One cool memory I have that probably made me feel like I was going in the right direction is that, I don't know if I ever told you this one, that we went to this tournament, we ended up playing this game Sunday afternoon. It's hot. I can specifically remember like 2 points in the game where I think I set up a goal, and I can remember hearing like two parents, and they were not our parents, say, wow, that guy's like really playing well. And I can remember hearing that and thinking like, okay, like this is great. So anyway, we get like the game goes to overtime, nobody scores, we get to penalty shots. And so our coaches are kind of talking, and they're like, okay, guys, here's the order. And they go like 1, 2, 3, 4. And then Mike, you're the fifth shooter. And I was like, I have to be like the fifth shooter, which is like, for anybody who doesn't know soccer, that's that's reserved for like Messi or like the really good guys. And I don't know who was good at that time, but that was like, okay, like there's a lot of faith and that trust. And I think that really made me feel like, man, like this is great. Like this is really what I want to do. And this is really, really exciting. And I think that's what always kept me coming back to the sport, and like to always, any sport really. Like they always talk about like a runner's high, and that's kind of what I've always found in sports and in soccer. So
what happened at the end of the game?
We ended up winning, but I didn't ever have to shoot.
So you appreciated the vote of confidence, but you didn't have to follow through.
Oh yeah, it was amazing. And I think my parents were happy I didn't have to either.
Yeah, because the pressure was off of them too.
Yeah, I think they had missed a couple shots and we had made most of ours. So
yeah,
our goalie ended up saving one of their last ones, so I didn't have to shoot. But it was, yeah.
Nice.
It was great. It was like, yeah, I was the fifth shooter, but that's all I would tell people.
But I think that kind of falls into somebody believes in me and somebody thinks like a lot of me. And so to be able to say that to a kid, like those coaches probably didn't think anything of it. They're just like, Mike's having a really good game, we're going to put him as the fifth shooter. But for you, it was like, whoa, my coaches believe in me. And so carrying that over into life stuff, that's pretty cool. So that is our time. I'm so happy that you took the time out of our evening to sit down and chat and put this on audio and video. And the whole point of this conversation is to hopefully just give people insight as to what an athlete goes through, how we can make a difference with the young people that we're working with, and to learn from each other's stories. So thank you so much for sharing your story.
No problem. Anytime.
Okay, awesome. If anybody is interested in learning about when these podcasts are coming out, you can sign up for my email list at my website, which is rihannaposkin.com. I will link everything below. I will be sending out strength and conditioning tips so I can help young athletes and coaches of young athletes to incorporate strength and conditioning into your practice sessions. And the biggest thing for me, my passion is to make sure that we are impacting kids in a great way. So thanks so much for joining me. And thanks, Mike. We will sign off for now. Bye, guys.
Bye.